What is going on, killers? Marines, soldiers, sworn peace officers, modern Minutemen, well-regulated militia, gunfighters of all ages. Welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting the right way, with God at the center and real-world first-hand experience. Today we're going to be talking about AR, pistols, quote-unquote pistols, which are not pistols at all, and we all know that. Just some weird classification that we have here. But I think very American. I think a lot of times here as Americans, we think of ourselves as the only culture that has and uses guns, but that's not true. I know that from looking at the list of countries, there are quite a few other countries, South Africa, Australia, that listen to Gunfighter Life. I think probably walking around armed with a pistol, concealed carry, is pretty unique. Not exclusively. I do believe maybe it's Croatia. There are other places where this is done, but it's pretty common here in America. Pistols and the modern carry of pistols is pretty American. Also, obviously the AR is quintessential American. So an AR pistol, the double cheeseburger of American. AR pistols are pretty American and pretty cool, and arguably one of the most uniquely American subcategories of firearms, these AR pistols, or SBRs if you want to go that legal route. But a short, handy AR that packs a lot of firepower in a little package. Now I gotta be honest, for a long time I was kind of anti these. I was an old school Marine. I was issued old woodland camo BDUs that you had to iron, and the black boots you had to polish. I still came out in that era, in that era. And to me, I liked an AR with a 20-inch barrel. If I had to, I guess, I would settle for a 16, but the thought of like a 10 to 12-inch barrel, that was just crazy. Who would do that? Abomination. But you know what? I was wrong. Just like I was wrong about red dots on pistols for a while, and I was stubborn. Actually gave one a try. And AR pistols are quite handy for a lot of situations. And maybe more so than you might think. Not just for, operators in an urban environment getting in and out of vehicles, which I've certainly used them in that environment quite well. A lot of other things they're handy for. They're quite a handy gun. That's why we're going to talk about them today, AR pistols, and whatever guise that might be. Why are we talking about it now? Well, it looks like they might get banned, and there's always talk about banning stuff. I don't have TV. I live off grid. You can't get much less TV than that. I don't even have service. But even I know there's talk about banning these things. And that may take a couple of forms. They may just ban them outright. They may go back to the thing where they said you can have a pistol brace, but you can't put it to your shoulder. They say no pistol braces at all, in which case you could probably use a buffer tube. They say you have to register it, or they may grandfather them in, saying if you have one now, you're kosher, and anything made after this point is no good. It's no bueno. That's one of the reasons I'm putting this podcast out now. It's germane. Not that you should buy anything out of fear, but if you've been wanting one, they may go that route and say if you already have it, you're good. But if you don't, you can't get it. Like when they did the assault weapons ban, you're old enough to have lived through that, and I am. You said if you have these magazines now, they're good, but anything made after this has to be 10 rounds or less. They may do a similar thing with pistol braces. It seems to be easier for people to ban stuff that you may get in the future than to take away stuff from people that they already have. So if you've been thinking about these or on the fence about them, as I was for a long time and I was honestly against them, I might change your mind here today and make the case that they're quite useful. Also, a little bit of housekeeping. Go to goodshepherdtraining.com if you want more. Also, I'm going to do something a little bit different by studying analytics, which is just a nerdy way of saying what does better on the podcast. I've noticed for whatever reason, there's way more downloads on Mondays. I flip-flop, and I've experimented with this, whatever the subject is, whether it's Gunfighter Life that I put out on Monday or Alpha Male Podcast. If you're not subscribed to both of those, maybe take a step back and reevaluate your life. But anyway, no matter which one I put out on that, it seems to be whichever one comes out on Monday. Monday by far gets the most downloads. So, by studying those analytics and by God's grace, I'm going to put out 2 on this Monday and see what happens. So you'll get the same amount of episodes. And the plan, what I'm thinking, is to put a rerun, a good older episode that ties in maybe to something this week on Friday. So you get the same amount of new content and you get a little bit extra content. And we'll see how that does as far as the analytics go. Just so you know, if you care. All that being said, that's quite the long preamble. I am going to plug in the bio. If you want to skip it, per the norm, skip around 3 minutes and 45 seconds. By God's grace, we'll get to talking about AR pistols. Who am I? A question we should all ask ourselves. I am, first and foremost, a servant of God, made in His very own image, a follower of Jesus Christ. A simple man called by God to the Great Commission to share the good news of Jesus Christ. Next, a little bit about my background and what God has allowed me to do and blessed me to do in life. Grew up what most would consider very poor in the backwoods of the southeastern and mid-Atlantic United States, hunting and fishing. Joined the Marine Corps at 17. Did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. So a decorated Marine Corps combat veteran. Infantry assaultman. After the combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. I also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also a veteran of law enforcement. I served with LAPD. I was a sworn peace officer, a cop for LAPD. I worked regular patrol assignments and more specialized assignments. One of those more specialized assignments was warrant service, fugitive recovery. Also had some other law enforcement roles. I am an FBI certified firearms instructor and been certified by another 3-letter government agency in a lot of firearms and training things. I've also been a private contractor, worked in the private sector pertaining to tactics and gunfighting and protecting America from enemies foreign and domestic. I served as the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters in a large metropolitan area. That was our primary mission, to stop active shooters, which sadly are a thing in America today. I've also been blessed to do quite a bit of competition shooting. Started my first formal competitions even before joining the Marine Corps at 17. I had won more shooting competitions than I can remember. I have competed in all manner of disciplines in shooting. I've been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion, West Coast regional champion. Like I said, been blessed to win more shooting competitions than I can remember. Mentioned hunting. I've hunted to put meat on the table starting when I was a child. I've also been a professional big game hunter and guide, hunting and slaying all manner of beast. And I don't apologize for that. Humbled to be the host of 3 podcasts. Simple Man Sermons, Alpha Male Podcast, and Gunfighter Life. Obviously, as things not mentioned, I've been blessed to do many other things. But, again, first and foremost, I'm a servant of God, a believer and follower of the Bible, the Word, Jesus Christ. And I don't apologize for that. With that, let's transition into today's topic. By God's grace, plan on this episode coming out initially in the year of our Lord 2022 on the 5th day of September on AR pistols. So as I alluded to in the preamble, for a long time I was against ARs. As an old school Marine, I thought 20 inch. Hit a man with iron sights at 500 meters. Ugh, yeah, get some. And then I kind of tried to step back from that little bit of brainwashing there and look at it circumspectly. I did a couple of tours in Iraq, and although as an expert rifleman, which I've been very blessed by God to win quite a few rifle competitions and be an expert rifleman in the Marine Corps, but even I will concede that never once in Iraq did I ever hear of or see any Marine making a nice loop sling and getting tension on his bicep muscle and making a wind call and dialing in dope on his rear sight to get good hits at 500 meters. Never saw it happen. I never did it. I never heard of it being done. I was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps under Mojave Viper, as you probably heard if you listened to the bio. We didn't teach it there. Just not that realistic. It's a good skill to know, and I hope the Marines continue to teach it. We did it with iron sights. Now they do it with ACOGs. Whatever. I still think every Marine ought to learn on iron sights. But I will concede that it's probably not that useful in real world scenario. I still think you should do it, because if you can be an expert rifleman and get good hits with iron sights at 500 meters, you can certainly get them at 50 meters with an ACOG. It's good to be a master of your craft and be an expert rifleman. But as far as real world, being good with weapon, real world, getting hits on target quickly, succinctly, in a dynamic environment, not so much relevant. What is relevant a lot of times in urban warfare, as you heard, I was commander of a tactical team, carrying a gun covertly a lot of times without raising a lot of alarms. Sometimes we did overt stuff where we wanted to be intimidating, and sometimes we did covert stuff. For covert stuff, that AR pistol kind of nice. Also, to carry that thing for long periods of time, that AR pistol's pretty nice. Sure, I can be highly mobile. I don't care how strong and fast you are. If you reduce the amount of weight you carry, you can get there faster. And that's important. Perhaps getting there faster and getting hits on target faster is more important than an extra length of barrel and an extra weight. Not for every situation, but for a lot of situations, that AR pistol comes in handy. And I said I was against them for a while, and I thought, I'll get one and give it a shot. I have my go-to all-around AR, which is not what this podcast is about, but it's a more standard AR. I've run that same AR for years and years. I ran it talking about those more specialized assignments in law enforcement. I've had that AR a long time, and I really like it for all-around. And I thought, you know what? Pre-COVID and crazy inflation and stuff like that, I'm going to get a beater AR. I'm going to use it to run a lot of ammo through, so I don't have to keep putting miles and wear and tear on my really good go-to AR. And again, I'm not a gun collector, I'm a gun fighter. I think I only have 2 actual built ARs. This one and my go-to one. Well, I bought this one. I think it was a PSA, everything but the lower, which I already had a lower. And I want to say, I could be misremembering this, I want to say it was $200 and something or $300 and something. It was certainly $300, or it may have been less. It may have been $2 something for everything. I don't think you're getting that today, but minus the optic, it's pretty much everything came in a bag except for the lower for really good price. And I thought, you know what, it's worth spending that money to save money in the long run, not beating up my good AR. Well, I got this thing, and I trained with it, and I beat the crap out of it, and I ran it, and it's a great gun, this little PSA pistol. Short barrel, nitrided, really good finish, really impressive accuracy. I mounted it with a solar powered hollow sun, because again, I was going to beat the crap out of this gun, and I have beat the crap out of this gun, and that optic has never once lost zero. It's never once had the optic fail on it and not work. And I've run that thing a lot, and I even started running it. I started to trust it so much I ran it professionally. Became what as much a go-to AR as my go-to AR. I kind of failed in the original purpose to get a beater crappy AR that messed up all the time that I didn't care about. Because this gun is awesome. And I found it to be very handy for the things we talked about earlier. When I'm a professional gunfighter, getting in and out of vehicles quickly, chasing down suspects in a metropolitan, big urban environment, in tight spaces, that AR pistol is nice. Not to mention, sometimes it's covert in a bag that doesn't scream AR-15. That thing is light and handy and I can carry it. Sometimes, mission dependent, I would take the SCAR 17. It was a better tool for the job. But huffing and puffing that thing around is a long day, a long shift. That little AR pistol is quite handy and quite light. And again, sometimes it's worth the trade-off. Sometimes I want to get there with the SCAR 17, especially if it's like a vehicle-borne threat. A vehicle ramming is a threat that we're facing. But mission dependent. Sometimes getting there quickly with that AR pistol is better. And I submit, perhaps for you. In fact, right now, the gun that is behind the driver's seat of my day-to-day vehicle is an AR pistol. It's that same AR pistol. It's fantastic. It literally sits in my bug-out bag. My bug-out bag is a Eberly stock, which if you don't know, it's a hunting bag. It doesn't scream tactical, but it's a good bag. Use it for all kinds of stuff in the real world, not just for bugging out. But this AR sits behind there like a scabbard, so I can literally reach behind my head and grab it from the driver's seat if I need to, and it fits in the bag. It's fantastic. It's a good little gun. And I changed my mind on AR pistols to say that they are quite handy and quite useful. If it was going to be my one gun, if you listen long enough, you know it's not. My at least one long gun. You know, I can probably carry a long gun and a sidearm. For my one long gun, it's not going to be an AR pistol. It's not even going to be an AR. It's not even going to be a rifle. So I don't think an AR pistol should be your one go-to, like, fighting gun. But I think it fills a niche that it fills better than almost anything else. If you either want to get there quickly or get away quickly, and or you want to be covert, and you want to have a lot of firepower and a little package, that's where that AR pistol shines. Also in urban warfare, operating in tight situations. Now I know, as I alluded to, I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps. Also a firearms instructor for the FBI. And they don't generally use these. They use what they have, just like in the military. I was issued an M16A2. Was it the best tool for the job? Absolutely not. In fact, mine had a catastrophic failure during the invasion of Iraq. Doesn't matter, you use what you're issued. But for my urban stuff, for like fighting in Baghdad, for doing Marine Corps stuff in Baghdad during the invasion, I think it would have been a better tool for the job. Better in all situations. I would not want to have that on the mountains of Afghanistan. I never went to Afghanistan. I went to Iraq. More than one tour in Iraq, but never went to Afghanistan. Just the way the cards fell, just the way my unit deployed. Also, I was a desert warfare unit, so it kind of made sense to send us to Iraq. But anyway, for the urban environment of Iraq, I think it would have been better. For the long mountain range environment of Afghanistan, probably would have been worse. So, and the Marine Corps is probably not going to issue you several different rifles. Like, where are you going today, Private Smith? Let me give you this cool rifle and train you on it. They're going to give you one, and that's basically going to be your rifle, so they change to something better as a whole, or you get out. I don't think it's the best all-around weapon. That's the point of that whole story there. But I do think for a lot of stuff, and a lot of urban stuff, and let's face it, I'm planning on this coming out, by God's grace, the same day as the one on urban survival. The majority of Americans don't live on a farm in the country. I live off-grid in the middle of the Pacific Northwest in the forest. That's not where most people live. Most people live in a suburb and commute to a city and then drive back to a suburb. They go from one people hive to a cube to back to a people hive. The ability to get in a good loop sling and get in a good prone position and make a 500-yard shot is not really anything they're ever going to probably do. Is that a great skill to have? Is that a great thing to be able to do? Yes. Is that a great tool for your toolbox, as the operators say? Yeah, it's fantastic. Is it likely? No. Is it even slightly probable? No. It's possible, but it's not likely. For the vast majority of things that the average person, I think the average gunfighter we talked about in the beginning, so that's an urban law enforcement officer, because most police departments, maybe not sheriff's departments, but most police departments are operating in an urban environment or a suburban environment. We talked about the average American. The average American probably lives in a suburb or a city and commutes to a city. And that AR will do the vast majority of everything they're ever going to need, and it will do it lighter and handier than certainly than a traditional M16 with a 20-inch barrel or a clone thereof, or an M4gery, a clone thereof, the 16-inch version. Even that's kind of what we think of today. It used to be we thought of as we used to think of like the M14 as like the standard rifle. And then the M16 was like this light handy thing. And then we thought, the M4 is the light handy version. We've gotten so far now that the M4 16-inch carbine is kind of the standard. And the AR pistol is kind of the light handier version of that. And there's a reason we're going smaller, because it'll still do the job a lot of times we're asking it to do. And can you hide a full-size M16? Well, you're not going to have the full auto one probably, but can you hide the clone of an M16 20-inch barrel, heavy barrel, A4 style with a flat top and a big optic on it in your Suburban or in your trunk of your sedan? Yeah, sure you can. You certainly can do that. You might not have time to get to your trunk. That little AR pistol you could probably put in a discreet bag and put it in your passenger seat next in between the seat and the floorboard. And you can grab it if there's a riot or looting or something right in front of you. That big M16A2 probably not going to be able to do that. Again, going back to the pack, a decent sized backpack that doesn't raise any alarm bells, you could walk around your neighborhood with. You could probably fit an AR pistol in there, and nobody's gonna bat an eye. If you get a giant rucksack and strap an M16 to the side of it, you're gonna raise some eyebrows. And sometimes, just like being the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters, sometimes it's better to be that visual deterrent and intimidation. I totally get that. But sometimes, even as a professional, it's better to be covert and sneaky and clandestine. And if you're trying to do that, a lot of times it's way easier to do with that AR pistol. So we've talked about the big thing that you're gaining. You are gaining concealability, and you are gaining lightweight, fast handling, and maneuverability in tight environments. Those are your big things that you're gaining. So what are you giving up? Because I said it's not the best all-around tool. Well, a lot of people would think that you're giving up accuracy, but you're not. A longer barrel is not more accurate, period. Now, a lot of people may regurgitate that because it's from a time when people shot rifles with iron sights, and if the iron sights are further apart, that gives you the ability to read your sights better and get better hits, making the ability of you to shoot it more accurate. But most of the ARs we're talking about today, let's be honest, you're probably going to run an LPVO, or on an AR pistol, even more likely a red dot. And for that, it doesn't really matter. And cutting the barrel in half is not going to... I mean, if you just take a hacksaw to it, yeah, it's probably going to mess up the accuracy. But if you get a gun designed with a 10, 11-inch barrel, it's not going to be any less accurate, the gun, than a 20-inch barrel. So you're not giving up accuracy, but you are giving up velocity. And that's just the reality. That's how it works. If you look at ballistics and how they work, especially on a rifle round like a 5.56, 223, it takes a long time to burn that gunpowder. Even on a 20-inch barrel, I think you're still not quite burning all that gunpowder. But when you go from a 20-inch barrel to a 16-inch barrel, you give up velocity. You're giving up power for the same load, same cartridge. You take the exact same, M855 round and shoot it out of a 20-inch M16 or a 16-inch M4, you're going to get less power out of the exact same round out of the M4 because it's got a shorter barrel. Now, if you go to a pistol, you're giving up even more. A general rule of thumb is between 50 and 100 feet per second per inch. So you're giving up quite a bit of power. And that is a big deal if you're talking about full metal jacket ammo. You expect to tumble, and that ogive, maybe that cantilever to kind of bend and give a little bit to cause it to tumble. That's velocity dependent. You're giving that up. But if you're talking about as a civilian where you can pick your ammo, or as law enforcement where you can have good, modern, expanding soft point or hollow point ammunition, as long as it expands at that lower velocity, it is going to have less velocity and therefore less power as far as numbers go, but that may or may not translate to less effectiveness on the target, because if you're pushing it to a velocity that will make that bullet expand, it may be, minimal what you're giving up there. But you are giving up velocity and power. That is a physics fact. As far as Newtonian physics go, you cut that barrel down on a rifle round like that, you're going to give up velocity. You are also potentially giving up reliability. Now, maybe I got spoiled on mine because mine has been ridiculously reliable. Like boringly reliable. I also don't run crap steel-cased ammo through it. I run good ammo through it. But it has been, again, boringly reliable. Now, since I have sample size of one, I most certainly have shot other people's, and I have shot other short-barreled, AR variants. But people that I trust that have good experience tend to say that the 11.5s run better than the 10.5s, 11.5 being like a minimum. I don't think that you're going to gain a lot of, maneuverability going from an 11.5 to a 10.5. I don't think you're getting that much better. And if you get more reliability out of the 11.5, I would tend to stick with that. If you get crazy short, we're mostly talking about the 5.56 still right now. You're basically, not basically, but the shorter you go, not only the less velocity you're giving up, but the more of that powder and explosion is happening outside the combustion of the barrel, which makes it quite loud. Any of these are not going to be hearing safe in 5.56 without a can, but shooting a 7, 8, 9 inch AR inside a bathroom in an urban environment, you might be reaching into like flashbang territory there. So I think if I'm giving a recommendation for a sweet spot, I'd say 11.5 is probably the shortest that I would go. You can do what you want. There are ways around this. I like piston ARs. My one go-to AR is a piston AR. Some people don't. That's fine. I'm just telling you what I like. I like piston ARs. One, because they're way easier to clean. Yeah, the piston gets dirty, but piston's way easier to clean than all the tiny little pieces and stuff in the bolt carrier. Anyway, I like piston. If you get a piston, theoretically, I don't know that it will be any less reliable with a shorter barrel with a piston, as long as the piston's done right. Like cutting it shorter and shorter with a direct impingement. There's a lot of engineering and stuff has to go into that. The carbine length gas system is pretty well proven and pretty well reliable in the M4. And that M4 is based on the carbine length gas system, which has pretty much been proven and tested. If you get too short, you can't use that, and you have to go like a pistol length gas system, which is not nearly as proven or tested. So again, check, figure it out. If I was given a recommendation, I would say 11.5. Now, what are you really giving up here? In addition to that, well, a lot of times that barrel doesn't hang out way past the gas block, which means, sadly, and this hurts me as a old school Marine, you can't mount a bayonet on it. So when you run out of ammo, how are you going to stick those zombie chipmunk Illuminatis that are coming to grab your tinfoil hat in your basement? You can't mount a bayonet. You're down to a K-bar. And as much as I love a K-bar, it's not as effective as a bayonet mounted on an AR, which is basically a spear. And that's just savage. And you can't mount a bayonet on any of these that I'm aware of, these pistol ARs. So you're giving that up. So just beware that you're giving up that bayonet capability. Sad day. But if you're willing to forego the bayonet, and if you're willing to give up that velocity, and make sure that yours is reliable, you do gain a lot as far as a lot of firepower in a small package. Let's talk about some other things here. I talked about mainly 5.56/223. Yes, there's a difference. I'm not going to go into that here. Because that's what I think by far the most common. You can obviously get these in other calibers just like anything else. Because of the way things work and the bigger barrel diameter versus the powder ratio of the 300 Blackout, you lose less velocity as a percentage, I do believe, when you cut off inches of a 300 Blackout versus a 5.56. Meaning for every inch you cut off of a barrel, let's say we start out with both in 16 inch, for every inch you cut off, if I literally took a saw and cut off an inch at a time, you would lose more as a percentage of velocity out of that 5.56 versus that 300 Blackout. Again, I've been accused, if you listen to the other podcast before this one on urban survival, I've been accused of not having any 300 Blackout love. But this is a case where it might be better. Also, we talked about a lot of you guys live in an urban environment or in a suburban environment and work in an urban environment. 300 Blackout, if it shines anywhere, shines in that environment. It was made for suppressive use. If you want to put a can on it, this is the one. It was designed for that. Can you put a can on a 223, 5.56? Sure. It's still loud. It's still loud. It's still not covert. It's still not clandestine. It is still loud. If you put a can on a subsonic 22 long rifle or on a subsonic 300 Blackout, it is quiet. It is kind of that quintessential, muffler, suppressor, silencer, quiet. It is meant for that. Because if you don't know, around the supersonic, that sonic crack happens outside of the can. So you really can't control that if it's supersonic. So you got to start out subsonic. And that 300 Blackout kind of shines in that guy. So if you're wanting to do that, or you want to run a can in your little bag, that is an area where that's going to help. You're already starting out subsonic, and you can get that amount of power in a very short barrel in the 300 Blackout. So that's not really a concern if you want to stay subsonic anyway. Those big, heavy for caliber, you're talking basically a 45 ACP. Now, not exactly. I know it's got higher sectional density and blah, 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 blah. But as far as numbers on a page, you're basically shooting a 220 grain bullet, which is very close to a 230 grain bullet, just shy of the speed of sound, which depends on altitude and temperature, but let's just call it, for argument's sake, a good round number of 1,000 feet a second. So you're basically shooting a 220 grain bullet at just under 1,000 feet a second, 45 ACP, basically doing the same thing. You basically got a high capacity, silenced, short and handy 45 ACP carbine, but actually a pistol, quote unquote pistol. And it can be quiet. That's pretty cool, especially in an urban environment. Like the 45 ACP, that 220 grain Blackout really doesn't derive its killing capacity from high velocity like the 5.56 and like a 55 grain does. It derives it from a big heavy bullet at moderate velocity, which tend to penetrate very well and hold their integrity very well. And you're pushing a big heavy projectile, which again is not as velocity dependent. So you got that. Another real popular thing to do is put it in a pistol caliber. There's a lot of these AR, I guess it's not a true AR-15 lower. You can make the adapters, but a lot of them now are dedicated to like 9mm Glock mags or 40-45 Glock mags. Probably the 9 and the 45. The 40, let's be honest, is kind of a dead cartridge. And I'm happy to see the obituary. Never liked that cartridge. If you do, that's fine. Not my thing. Never has been. I was issued a Glock 22 in LAPD. Didn't care for it. Quickly went to the 45. Anyway, and then I eventually realized and settled on the 9mm long before it was the new hot thing. Anyway, that said, any of these pistol rounds you can get in this small AR quote-unquote pistol kind of guys. You do get something cool there, especially if you are a Glock person and run Glock mags. You could get one that takes the same mags. I think that's kind of overblown how important that is, but it is a benefit. How much of a benefit it is for you, I don't know. You have to judge that on your own, but that is something cool. And 9mm ammo, if that's your jam, if that's, you're a 9mm guy, you already have a bunch, you have a bunch of 9mm saved up. Kind of get the opposite with the 9mm. Whereas most 9mm ammo is designed to shoot, let's say, a 4 to a 4.5 inch barrel, and a big handgun, a full-size handgun, is going to be a 5 inch. Like let's say you're shooting a 1911 and a 9mm. That's 5 inches. Most of your AR pistols are going to be 7 to 9 inches or maybe 10 or 11 inches. So you're gaining velocity over your normal velocity there because you're making the barrel longer. So just like before you were chopping it down and giving up velocity from the M4, if you're going from a pistol, you're kind of adding velocity, which is going to add power. Now you got to be careful of the opposite problem here because a lot of those handgun rounds were designed to work at a certain velocity in a handgun. So if you push it too fast and it's a modern hollow point, it may expand too quickly and underpenetrate. Because every time the object expands in diameter, it loses ability to penetrate. That's how that works. So you got to be careful with your ammo selection here, but you are gaining power on paper. So you have that going for you. That said, I still think if I'm going to run a small AR, in most cases I would prefer a rifle round to a pistol round. But you make your own choices. I still think it's a step up in firepower versus like your Glock 19 to step up to an AR pistol. Now, you're not probably going to CCW that from day to day. That's not really what it's for. It's for that small handy bag, for something like that. So I'm just making you aware that if you want to go the AR route, and you mostly want to just have fun with it and shoot it, and you already have Glock mags and you already have a bunch of 9mm, you can go that route. And that might make a lot of sense. It's still going to give you a step up in firepower over, for most people especially, the average handgun shooter over the Glock 19. You can mount an optic on it. You can take advantage of that pistol brace. You have more points of contact. These are all manner of boutique rounds. You might be able to find a 350 Legend in a 11 inch, or you might be able to get a 6.8 in an 11 inch if that's your bread and butter, your cup of tea there. And those are fairly obscure, so I'm not going to get into the ballistics on cutting those down. But anytime you get outside the norm, like the XM193, that's made for a 20-inch barrel. You start getting away from that, you got to look at whether you're getting what you want out of that bullet and maybe go to something else. Anytime you get outside the norm, like I said about the handgun ammo, if it was designed for a Glock 19 to have proper bullet expansion, you may not get good performance out of even a more powerful 11, 12-inch barrel. It might be pushing it so fast that you overexpand that bullet and it doesn't penetrate as well. It might do fine, it might do better, it might do worse. But if you're getting outside the design parameters of that projectile, which are as important as the gun itself, because no matter how light and handy and cool and Instagrammy, if that's a word, I just made it a word, I guess. If it's super Instagrammy and super cool looking and space age AR pistol, but the bullet doesn't do what it's supposed to when it hits the target, the bullet is what does the damage on the target. So you got to realize that, and you got to be willing to do the research, I think, if you're going to responsibly use an AR pistol. Again, I don't think the AR pistols are the best all-around, gun for really anything. They're a niche gun, but it's a pretty big niche. And if you have that itch and you want to scratch it with an AR pistol, it's a good choice. Anyway, with that, I hope you've liked this episode. If you listened to all that and you found it useful, you found it helpful, and you're still hungry for more, goodshepherdtraining.com. If you like the podcast, if you want to help other men find it, again, goodshepherdtraining.com. Another way you consider helping, if you like this podcast or Alpha Male Podcast or Simple Man Sermons, share them. Just click that little link, that little square with the arrow, and send it to somebody you think might enjoy it. And just say, hey, Joe, I just listened to this. I know you were thinking of AR pistols. I think you might like this. Now, I know podcasts aren't for everybody, and I'm talking about niches. I'm in a niche market, the podcast, and I'm a niche podcast in a niche market. They're not for everybody, but if you know somebody that you think might enjoy it or benefit from it, share it. It's free content. With that, as a thanks for listening to this episode of Gunfighter Life, the tactical tip of the day. We talked about short ARs. What about short shorts? That's right, Marines and soldiers. I'm talking about Silkies, the best running workout and pajamas a gunfighter can buy. I'm sitting here right now looking at a pair of Rhodesian camo Silkies that I wear quite often. I just picked them up. They were right beside me, within arm's reach, like my EDC gun. Bam! Silkies at the ready. If you don't know about Silkies and you're man enough to put them on, Silkies are awesome. If you run, if you work out, Silkies. They're super comfy. They're the most comfortable running, let's say, running garment you can have. You can scrunch them up and fit them in the palm of your hand. And that's pretty much all you need to go running. Your Silkies and your bayonet, and you're ready for zombie, Illuminati chipmunks, or whatever you think is going to happen. I'm just teasing there. I know the world is rapidly changing. That's one of the reasons I do this podcast. I want you guys to be ready. Watch and be ready. Nobody knows the day or the hour. That being ready is being physically fit. Silkies. If you're outside, if you weren't in the military, you don't know about Silkies. Silkies, look them up. They're awesome. For some reason in, culture, our ARs have been getting shorter, but our shorts have been getting longer. Let's go back. What's that? MAGA? Make America gunfighters again. Part of being a gunfighter is being physically fit. And Silkies, I think, should be part of every warrior ensemble. With that, that's going to bring us to the tactical verse of the day. How about Psalm 25? Bring me out of my distress. Look on my affliction and my pain, and forgive all my sins. Consider my enemies, for they are many, and they hate me with cruel hatred. Keep my soul and deliver me. Let me not be ashamed, for I put my trust in you. Let integrity and uprightness preserve me, for I wait for you. Hopefully we're all, as gunfighters, watching and ready and on guard for whatever threat may come. But that readiness, that preparedness, should be more than just bayonets and cases of ramen noodles. It should be spiritual. Spirit, soul, mind, and body being ready. Whatever happens, I wait for the Lord and I trust in the Lord, God Almighty. It is written in Exodus 15, the Lord is a man of war. If the Lord's a man of war, he is the greatest. Because God is number one. So if you want to learn how to be a good warrior, study your Bible. With that, men, thanks for listening and have a blessed day.